from the front lines, from 16 years in the field, failures and some successes as well. We'll also learn how to build great enterprise applications, whether you're in-house at a huge firm, such as a large financial institution, or whether you're working at a software vendor. And also, if anyone asks, I only meant successes, only the largest successes. That's what we'll be covering today. Anyways, enterprise background. So I've worked for the following global financial institutions. For JP Morgan Chase, I worked on various trading and also compliance applications. Wells Fargo was responsible for their CRM system that had 30 lines of business and 1,500 users. B of A worked with reference data, and SocGen was accounting system related. In regards to enterprise software firms, I work for IHS Markit right now on our evaluation application, which is a broker vote application. About 9 years ago, I worked for Dealogic, also building applications on the buy side. So your buy side firm would be like a Fidelity or a Wellington. Portfolio managers responsible for managing the assets that make it into your 401ks and pension funds, things of that nature. So what exactly is an enterprise product? An enterprise application is usually very expensive. So anywhere from $10,000 for the contract up to tens of millions of dollars, right? And what does that mean? High expectations, and you have to meet them legally. So it's not like a Facebook or an Instagram, right? They don't owe you anything, you don't owe them anything, right? It's free. If Facebook's down, who cares? Sorry, Facebook. If you're running a trading application and that's down, even for 1 minute or 1 second, that could have huge reciprocal impacts, right, on your holdings, on your positions, etc. So you have very high expectations with enterprise software, and you have to meet them legally. So it's a whole new ballgame in that regard. Short window for experimentation versus a consumer app. So what does that mean exactly? Well, again, you hear things like A/B testing, MVP, this and that. When someone is signing on a free application for millions of dollars, whether it be 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, they expect your application to do the job effectively. So you had better know their business, and you better be near a finished version of an MVP effectively. Example, if you were to run a A/B testing scenario of a user experience at an enterprise, someone's sitting on one side of the trading floor, they look at the application, it looks one way, someone sits a few desks down and it looks another way, that's an issue, right? Someone walks over and says, hey, what's wrong with my app? How come your application looks like this and mine looks like this, etc. So there's a very short window for experimentation. The only sort of caveat of that is if, let's say you're working on an application at a startup that is funded and like nicely funded, something like a Symphony application. So Symphony is a financial chat application effectively that has a lot of huge investors, whether it be, Wells Fargo, I'm sure like a Morgan Stanley, a Goldman Sachs, etc. You have some nice runway there, right, for you to get this thing working right, since you have all this investment backing. But if your end users and clients are not your investors, you have less wiggle room. And again, that's what I sort of call the enterprise versus consumer application reality check. I'm not handing you money to learn my business, right? The reason I'm signing with you is I don't want to build this in-house. I expect you guys to be experts and know how to do the job effectively. So first up, enterprise monolith. So let's see how to succeed there. 3 main goals for enterprise software that's built in-house. And what I'll be explaining mostly here is in regards to a CRM application, which I was recently responsible for a few years. Goal number 1, make money. Second goal, save money. Third goal, operate more efficiently, right? And that usually helps the first and the second one. So why is a huge organization buying a really expensive enterprise application such as the Salesforce CRM? They want to make more money, right? So if we're looking at, for example, sales account managers who are managing a pipeline, ideally they're able to cover more accounts, save money. Maybe we need less admins now, or juniors. Maybe we can have our sales people, cover more accounts. Operate more efficiently, same thing. You have all of the data at your fingertips as your clients and your prospects. You can operate more efficiently. Reason I want to sort of highlight the 3 main goals for enterprise software is it's very easy to fall into a trap when you're building an application at a huge organization where, again, if I use the example of 30 separate lines of business, 1,500 users, that's a lot of enhancement requests, right? And I had a good manager there that sort of honed me in on these things and made sure that every enhancement that we rolled out hit some of these boxes. And we'll speak more about sort of gaining adoption and support and sort of quick wins and things of that nature. But if you want to get recognition at the high level, you always want to focus on why your system is in the building in the first place. So have these 3 things in mind. How to get things done? Have to get buy-in and listen to stakeholders, right? So again, you could have the loudest users on the planet, sales assistant, etc. But in reality, again, the stakeholders are what matter the most. Your users are what matter the most in regards to what functions that they need, but at the end of the day, you have to make sure that you're executing and listening to your stakeholders. It's key. You want to get a bunch of quick wins, right? So effectively, you can't start chucking 3s at your first game. You want to get those small wins with little sort of pockets of key users if you can, whether it's making another report for them, adding a checkbox, whatever. Again, we're speaking about enterprise applications. A lot of them are very big, have a huge amount of functions, and you'll end up rolling something out and think it's the greatest thing on the planet, and then they'll say, I don't know how to use it, or I'm not using it, right? So it's very important to get those little wins. And it's also really important to show that you actually care, which is something that shouldn't be short-sighted, right? Because especially if you're rolling out an application onto a trading floor or something like that, they have a million things to worry about. Most likely, they're only letting you have this much of your screen for your application, and you want to show them the value that your app has, and you want to win them over. Find allies. Again, power users are key, especially out of the gate. So when I first rolled out the Salesforce CRM application for the equity sales and trading team, I'm like, this is great, flick the switch, right? User adoption, not there. So then I'm like, okay, is it the application? What is it? And again, it's salespeople, right? We own our data. Stakeholders say, hey, how come they're not using it, this and that? And there's a lot of psychological factors that you have to get over with enterprise applications sometimes. So it was key for me to find allies and specific power users who are really into it, using the application effectively. I was able to deliver, quick wins for them, and then I saw adoption start to tick up. And it's sort of like this social proof example that I like, which is the story of a religious leader, effectively, who stands in front of a bunch of people, and then he actually planted individuals in the audience who would hand money into the till when it went around the audience. And it's like the same thing, right? You're more likely to do something if you see someone else doing it first. And that's just a fact. Lead without authority. Again, have to find the allies, since you'll be asked to lead without authority, right? You might be selling or implementing a system in which, you're simply the product manager, And at the top they say, hey, how come they're not using it? You're right. If you hear someone say like, oh, is management looking at these reports? Of course they are, you know? So don't be afraid to let those thoughts sort of propagate if it'll help your end mission. You know, you don't want to go that far with that, but in other words, you have to lead with that authority, and having the wins and the power users are key. Have fun, but stay pragmatic always. So at these huge organizations, 300,000 employee firms, yes, odds are they have millions and millions of dollars that they're throwing at these projects. However, you have a number of project managers and also program managers who are managing all these, right? And if they don't see effectiveness of your project and they think that you're effectively burning a hole in your pocket, they will cut the project. Thankfully, I haven't experienced that, but I'm sure one day I will. And I'm sure some of you have in the past as well. So make sure to stay pragmatic. Example, I was in a meeting with a business leader who were speaking about the CRM with other senior leaders and all the things they want in it, this and that, and then this one senior leader says, yeah, and then we're going to integrate it with seamless web, and you can order your food through this thing, and this and that, and I'm just like having nightmare flashbacks, and I'm like, oh my God, don't say that, please. Because, again, that's an example of, right now, we're just sort of trying to get adoption, and everybody on the same structure here and workflow, and this guy's speaking about ordering food, you know, it's terrible. So anyways, have fun, but make sure to solve the core objective with your app. Another thing I hear all the time, we need mobile. And I ask if we really need mobile. So for something like a CRM, sure, you know, but something for an app that is only used, if I look at the application I run now, it's used maybe once a quarter from its largest user base, and they have to fill out maybe 100 or more fields in one shot. You know, they'll sit there for a few hours for a day and that's it. They don't need it on their phone, right? These users happen to be all over the place. So why I want to focus on this is mobile is expensive. Mobile is never cheap, right? There's iOS, there's Android, etc. There's a lot of standards you have to keep up with. Ask yourself if you really need mobile before you build it. Politics. I don't even know how far I want to go on this one. When you work at a large organization, it's something you have to deal with, right? Make friends, solve a lot of people's problems, have stakeholders in mind, and you'll do well. And also another important thing is really to give respect to individuals at all levels, whether they're an admin assistant or the CEO. It's very important. Everybody talks to everybody else, and it's just important to be nice. I know there's no earth-shattering revelation here, but it's very important at a large firm that you make a lot of allies. So just want to run through that for a moment. All right, next stop, enterprise software firm. Very different. 3 main goals. First goal, you want to build things that solve actual user problems, right? At these huge organizations, a lot of projects get funded for a lot of reasons. But when you're at a vendor, you have to solve a problem that someone is willing to write a check for. And we're not speaking about like Snapchat, which is free, right? We're speaking about something someone's going to write a check for $15,000, $50,000, $100,000, $1 million, right? And there's this wonderful software application you guys may have heard of named Microsoft Excel. And a lot of our products can be replaced with Excel. Sad to say, right? It's a lot more onerous. There's no nice login. There's no fancy UI. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of stuff we're making is really fancy versions of Excel and Microsoft Access. So make sure you're building things that are solving user problems. Sell them, learn from it, iterate, and then expand the market and sell some more. I like the Reid Hoffman statement where he said, if you're not embarrassed by your first release, then you release too late. If I look at my recent application evaluation, which was all gray, I feel this way. It's much nicer looking now, 1 year later. So 3, world's domination, and that obviously helps achieve number 1 and number 2. Selling enterprise products to prospects and also to clients. 1, know what impact your software will have in an organization and know your audience. What this means is the following. If you walk in and you're ready to pitch your application and you're meeting with the head of an operations team and maybe they also have an operations team member in there, don't walk in and say, hey, we can replace your whole team with this new application, you know? Because then you can have the best application on the map and they will not buy it. They will shut it down, right? There are a lot of sort of political hierarchy things you have to worry about. Ideally, if that message has to come out and if you really will save the firm a lot of money via headcount, things of that nature, that's really something you should speak with like a CIO. And as a manager I had in the past also said, you know, if you're smart enough to make your job replaceable with a system, then we'll find something else for you to do, right? If you're smart enough to replace your own job effectively. But anyways, know your audience when you walk into any of these meetings. Stakeholders are extremely important, but they're rarely your end users, right? So it's very different when you walk in and you're selling your product and then when you actually have end users using it, right? It's one thing to get through the door and sell something, but make sure to have your finger on the pulse with the end users, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who will make or break your user adoption and whether a firm moves forward with your product after the contract's signed. Okay, so competitors, partnerships, and ethics. So surprisingly, and I'm learning this more now than ever, the first and second one may flip more often than one might think, right? And it's a small world out there. You could end up working for one of your competitors the very next day, right? They could buy you, could merge. Same thing for partnerships, right? So it's very important to always look for the win-win with your partners. And also, speaking of your competitors in a very respectful manner is also important, whether you're in front of prospects or whether you're in front of clients, because again, it's a very small world. And ethics, that really just wraps the whole thing up, right? I've certainly lost out of deals in the past and said, you know what, they have a great product. And what are we going to do? We're going to build a better one. That's all we can do, right? So just something to keep in mind. Okay, so now I'd like to speak about how to build great applications either as a vendor or in-house. It's the same themes for these enterprise applications. So if I refer back into Salesforce CRM Example, I like to say it's sort of like an empty house. So they roll it out, it's this wonderful architecture, and really you can do anything with it. You can make a screen that has 50,000 fields, you can send data here or there, except then you might end up with something like this, which is something that happened to me as well. This is the screen I ended up with, right? Main screen with awesome things users want to track. So you meet with a very ambitious sales manager. He says, hey, we're going to put in this, that, and all these little nuggets of information, and we're going to report on them. That's going to be great. Yes. All right, let's build it. No one used it, right? Sales team saw it. They're scared. Imagine if half of these fields were required, right? You run the other way also. And also they have an easy out. Like, look at this thing. It's a mess. There's 100 fields. What do I do? I'm afraid. So anyways, I ended up meeting with that sales manager and said, hey, well, actually his boss, and said, hey, wait a minute. Let's figure out what you really want to work on here. And he said, okay, well, the stuff I only really care about is like, who did you meet with? When did you meet? What did you talk about? And when's the follow-up? 4 fields. So simplicity matters. Simplicity matters. Save your product's life by saying no. Something I mentioned earlier a little bit of. I mean, if you're lucky, one of the best things about building enterprise apps is that more often than not, you can face off with the users right away, right? I used to sit on a training floor, and if I wrote something out that they felt stunk, they would let me know the second I walked on the training floor, right? Oh, it's so slow, my life, oh my God, what are you doing? However, working out as a vendor, you're not as fortunate, to have that feedback. You have a few walls in front of you, right? You have like a client success team, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, no matter how you get all these enhancements back, you really have to evaluate how they will help the application as a whole and how they will solve the objectives of the majority of your users. Otherwise, you end up with an app with 100 fields on it. That's unusable. If you're building a product for an administrator and maybe they have 300 functions they have to do in the app and they live in the app every day, that's fine. You want to have 100 menus, that's fine. If you're making an application that's facing a trader who, even if he has like 8 screens, he only wants to give you this much real estate, make sure you have the one function that they use most often in a slice of real estate that's this big, and that's okay. So make sure to know your user's time, whether they have 1 second to use your application or they use it all day. Adding value with your app, even for users who never log in. So what that means is there's a lot of senior managers at enterprise firms who have no interest in logging into your app. They're all over the place. They have access to 1,000 apps, right? So it's key you focus on ways for you to effectively send them the information they need, whether it's automatically emailed reports, a dashboard, something of that nature. But don't make management have to log into your app. Find a way to export all the data out and send it over to them in some fashion. When I had to give a demo on how to enter a meeting in front of a room full of 30 traders, literally one guy who was one of the most senior in the room slammed his fist on the table and said, "Now I have to enter my meetings." I'm sure you can figure out what that word was, and literally walked out. And I said, okay, great. So I rolled on with the rest of the demo. Then afterwards I met with him, had a chat, said, all right, maybe I can save a click or two. And then he still didn't like entering his meetings, but we had a good relationship, and he entered them afterwards. So anyways, your worst users give the best feedback. If you know someone's a hard user, you shouldn't be afraid to reach out and speak to them. I literally had a woman scream at me once on the trading floor. And maybe she had something else going on, who knows? It was just over the application, and I was just like, it's okay, we'll help you out. So never be afraid of the users. All right, so how to get better at product management. Build stuff. That is what I recommend. Whether it's, music, woodworking, anything, some of the stuff I do, just make sure you build stuff, and you'll learn a lot along the way. I happen to build something recently. Who buys coffee? So with this app, effectively, you basically hit this little button in the middle, it spins, and then it lets you know whether you're buying or I'm buying. So what makes this interesting, I guess, is the fact that I had no Swift or Xcode experience. I had one Swift Udemy course, about 100 hours of work, learning how to build Swift apps, learning how to build this thing, 3 months, nights and weekends. I was rejected from the App Store 6 times, most of the time for the fact that I had a single question mark in the project name. So I had to go in all of the source files and fix it. Knew none of that, and thank you, Stack Overflow. Shout out. But that's not all. Did this with a couple little kids, a wife, and a full-time job. So what I'm saying is I'm no hero. I'm saying that you can do this, you just have to find the time. You have to make the time. And you can do this. Happy to say, 5-star App Store rating, over 100 upvotes, and 100 downloads. Not a million, but that's okay, right? And here are some of the funny responses from the app, and then the revenue numbers. Boom. I made $1.17. So I'm ready to retire. I don't even have to stand here right now. Anyways, the reason I wanted to show that was it wasn't about making all this money with this thing. While it would have been wonderful if I retired right now, it was really about the journey, right? The experience. So how to make a marketing website, how to build an app, how to deploy it, run my own dev sprints, run my own sort of QA testing, and run through the nightmare of 6 App Store rejections. Nothing was like that feeling when I hit submit for the App Store. I'm like, I'm done. I was far from done. It was a whole nother almost 3 weeks for me to get that thing through, and a lot of Stack Overflow searches, because Apple has the finest of standards, which apparently it didn't think Who Buys Coffee met at first. It is available on the App Store, and let's make that 117 118. All right, guys? Thank you.